Ready? My name is Mark Webster. I'm the president of the Friends of the Jefferson County Law Library, where you are right now. Thank you for coming. Before I introduce the speaker, I was going to let you know that we have a monthly series of these talks. Next month, April 16th, Charles Booker will be talking about his book, From the Hood to the Holler. If you haven't read it, this is worth, we have a copy here. It's worth it because you'll recognize everything. He's from Louisville. Much of what he writes about is about Louisville. And of course, he was on television Thursday night with the primary debate among Democrat candidates. I don't know, I didn't see it, but I read about it in today's paper. I want to introduce our speaker today. Sarah Landenwich is I guess a native of Louisville, went to Manual School for the Performing Arts, then Bellarmine has an undergraduate degree, master's from Louisville, right? Taught, was in Colorado, now she's back. And this is her first book. And this is an amazing, I think, first book. If you look back like at Faulkner, take a look at his first book. You can't barely read it. I mean, or even Hemingway or some of the great writers, you know, they seem to get better. I think she got better from the very beginning. This book is interesting because it's written by a writer who's also a musician. Chris and I today were trying to think of that combination that's kind of rare, but here's what we came up with. Ralph Ellison, I don't know if you ever read Invisible Man, I highly recommend it. He played the trumpet. Maya Angelou, I don't know if you've ever read Why the Caged Bird Sing. She had been a calypso singer. Anthony Burgess, Clockwork Orange, great book. He was a wonderful pianist. He was not classically trained, but he wrote a number of books on piano. And then Shel Silverstein, I don't know if you remember him, The Giving Tree and that type of thing. The song A Boy Named Sue and that type of thing. He wrote a number of books and played a number of instruments. So there's something to that. Now there are a number of musicians who wrote nonfiction books, like Wagner, Berlioz, Ned Rorem. You know, they wrote books about their life and that type of thing. But this is an unusual combination. This book, I think.
You can introduce Gigi.
I didn't know who the cat was.
He's mine.
I'll close my remarks by saying that the book is interesting, and on page, I guess it was 336, there's a sentence that struck me. You were talking about why do we write or why do we read? Here's the sentence. Creative expression is born from a desire to express in tangible form the wild human experience in a way someone else might understand. I mean, that's the whole point of music. That's the whole point of writing, whole point of talking. So I will now not talk.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Thank you all for coming. It's so nice to see you all and so many people who seem to know so many Landenwiches as a benefit of having a weird name in a smallish city, right? So today I'm going to talk a little bit about the Fire Concerto, which, as Mark said, is my first book, but he gave me too much credit because it's really just my first published book. I wrote another book before this that never got published, which is really common in the life of a writer to have so many failures on the way to success. But it's been very exciting to finally have one out in the world, and I'm really delighted to share some with you today. So I'm going to read a little bit from the book, and then I thought we would open the discussion to, you know, however we want to explore it. There are many interesting topics that we can delve into, such as history, historical research, the writing and publishing process, and of course I know some of you have read the book, and if you have any questions directly related to it, I know all the answers. So I like to kind of give people context for how this book came to be, and the best way to do that, in my opinion, is to read you a letter that was included with the advanced copies of this novel. So many people who are even avid readers don't know that in the publishing industry, before a book comes out, many, many months before, things called advanced review copies, also known as ARCs or ARCs, are mailed out to review outlets and to bookstores so that people know what's coming in order to get excited about it. And this is the ARC of my book. So they're always paperback, and they look similar to the published book that comes out later, but they have extra information on it, you know, people saying, this is the best book you'll ever read, you know, that kind of thing. And it's becoming more common in the industry for the writer to include a letter to these reviewers so that they understand a little bit about what inspired the book. And these letters, unfortunately, are never included in the copy that readers get. And I feel like that's a great disservice because they offer so much context. So I am excited today to be able to read you mine. Dear reader, I was a teenager studying piano at a performing arts high school when I first learned about the concept of musical ancestry, a kind of pedagogical family tree. The goal is to try to trace your musical lineage back to a great composer or performer. The idea is that if your teacher's teacher's teacher was somebody great, some of that greatness was somehow distilled down to you. For instance, I am a musical descendant of Franz Liszt, which sounds impressive unless you know that Liszt was a prolific teacher who taught scores of pupils over the course of his long life. There are thousands of us Liszt descendants walking around, and let me be the first to tell you that I am no musical genius. Did I get anything of the great composer from my own piano teacher, who taught me if you're going to fail, fail loud, and who once banged her fist on the stage floor and screamed, Poland, 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 while I feverishly rehearsed Chopin? She certainly made an everlasting positive impact on my life, but I doubt that has anything at all to do with Franz Liszt. As an adult, I see the layers of pretension and exclusivity in this idea of musical lineage, as well as the emptiness of it. I've known my share of incredibly talented people. Some had the privilege to study with renowned teachers. Most did not. As a community college instructor of writing, not of music, I taught a number of talented young people as well. None of them attended a prestigious school or studied with a remarkable mentor, but there were a few whose talent could have wowed the world stage, and may still. But teachers do shape us. The best ones shape us forever. So do the worst. In the pursuit of excellence, many artists encounter a teacher or mentor who leads with fear instead of love, shame instead of praise, abuse instead of instruction. I once met a violinist who, when he was just a little boy, had a teacher who held the tip of a knife below his elbow while he played. He would learn the proper form, or he would bleed. I don't believe greatness can be passed down like a precious heirloom, but I think trauma can be. So I set out to write a novel about three women, one in the 19th century, one in the early 20th, and one in modern times, connected by their musical lineage. Of course, back in the 19th century, where this story begins, this musical line would have begun with a man. And of course, since they were women in a time when women weren't supposed to be good at anything outside the domestic sphere, the women in the earlier time periods of this story would have faced soul-crushing obstacles. Some of those obstacles would have been the very men who were supposed to champion them. I conjured the famed composers of the Romantic period, their bombast and mental health struggles, their pain and poeticism. I built a genius monster, that tortured artist who is terrible to know, but who creates sublime art. I brought into his life a female pupil, a talented, strong, incredibly gifted woman who harbors secret ambitions of composing. She turns out to be more talented than him. They both know it. And then I thought, wait, I know how this story goes. You do too. The woman is the one who composed the music, and the less talented jerk of a man who served her talent and glory, right? That's a good story. And it's an important story because it's a real story that happened throughout history more than we will ever know. But it's also a story I could see all the way through to its end, like a boat sailing out to sea. And I wanted some waves. So I thought, what if I lead the reader to think they're reading that familiar story? And then, if after you've read, you think I've failed in my pursuit, I hope at least you think that I failed loudly. With deepest gratitude for reading, Sarah Landenwich. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of how this story came about. I trained as a classical pianist, as Mark said, and then as I went on in my life, I decided that wasn't the life for me, and I switched and I became an English major and I started writing. And along the way, the idea of music and all that it meant to me was still living inside me. And eventually, it kind of came to fruition in this book, which in my view is kind of like the repository for all of the knowledge that I had about music and the piano. So the Fire Concerto follows a woman named Clara Bishop, who was a concert pianist until her hand and arm were badly burned in a fire, thus ending her career. And when this novel opens, it's 1997. She's working as a bartender in Austin, Texas, having left that life of music behind. And she learns that her piano teacher has died and left her an unexpected inheritance, an ornate 19th-century metronome with a cryptic message hidden inside its box. Clara soon comes to suspect that this is the long-lost metronome of a famous composer, a priceless object that has been missing since 1885, when the composer was murdered by one of his pupils, a brilliant female musician alleged to have been insane. Clara doesn't know how her teacher came to possess this metronome, and she doesn't know why the teacher gave it to Clara. And these questions spur her on a journey to Warsaw, where the composer lived and died, to uncover the truth about what really happened the night of his death. So I'm going to read just a little bit from the first chapter of the book, and then we'll have a discussion. This is the last scene of the first chapter. The reader has met Clara at her bar where she's working, and we've seen Clara draw a lot of attention from people at the bar because of her appearance, because she has bad burn scars on one half of her face, on one arm, and on one hand. So a lot of people have noticed and are looking at her. We've also seen her receive a letter that she does not want to open. And she's been carrying around this letter in her pocket all night, and where we meet her here, she's on her way home to finally open this letter that she knows to be from her piano teacher, whom she has been estranged from for 10 years, and who she does not want to have any contact with. At 2 o'clock, Clara herded the last straggling graduate students out the door, and she and Julian closed up for the night. Julian offered to give her a ride, but Clara declined. She liked to bike at night. Back at the beginning, after the fire, she thought about moving to Alaska or Finland, somewhere cold and dark. But that winter, holed away in her parents' house in Chicago, she discovered that cold could penetrate her scars. It bore into the bones of her burned arm and hand, the dead tissue expanding like a river freezing against its banks. By February, the entire right side of her body was frozen. The doctors told her it was just the nerves adjusting, and the pain would eventually subside. Her mother used the mysterious symptoms as an excuse to suggest that Clara spend some time away. In the reverse act of her entire childhood, during which all Clara wanted was to get away from her parents, Ruth rustled up the idea of Austin, where the bishop's neighbor kept a second home, and where the coldest it usually got was a film of frost on a windshield. It was a city of music, but nothing like the music Clara had devoted her life to. Guitars twanged from every bar, but never once did she hear Chopin or Rachmaninoff or even Tinny Mozart in a department store elevator. 3 months in, she decided to stay. She saw the rockabilly crowd smoking cigarettes in front of a dive bar down the street, their drunken laughter audible even from a half-mile away. Clara mounted her bike and headed in the opposite direction. Luke and the woman in the Radiohead t-shirt had left the bar around 11. Clara tried not to watch as they walked out the door together, just as she tried not to look at the woman's flawless skin for the rest of the night, while the two of them talked about the state of prog rock and their shared love of the Replacements. What was the point? She had spent years obsessing about other women's beauty. It hadn't changed anything about her own face, and wouldn't ever. Years ago, when her mother was still taking her to plastic surgeons, and they had both allowed themselves to believe medicine could reverse what had been done, Clara had rubbed oils and creams into her skin each night and counseled herself that in a year, then 2, 3, 5, she would be good as new. But the oils and creams couldn't change the mottled look of her cheekbone, where the skin had been grafted from her thigh, or regrow the part of her eyebrow that had been forever singed away. Nor had they eased the stiffness in her knuckles or the hot shocks of pain that flickered across the palm of her hand. Forever into the future, her scars would be the first thing anyone saw. Luke would be no different. She could tell by the askance way he looked at her, his eye contact slightly off-center, as if he were trying to prove he didn't see them. Clara had dated enough people to know that they wouldn't make it past the second date. He was the type who would want to open the baggage, talk things out, plumb her past. This was why she poured his whiskeys light. She biked over the Congress Avenue Bridge, where the tall buildings of downtown reflected off the choppy glint of the Colorado River. Across the water, it was darker, the glow of the city receding behind her. She passed the Austin Motel and Allen's Boots before turning at St. Mary's United Methodist, where the yard sign said, "Come as you are." Someone had spray painted K. Cobain beneath the words. Clara pedaled past the sign into the leafy neighborhood, coasting by a row of tidy bungalows before dismounting at a chain link gate. Bingo, her elderly St. Bernard, was waiting at the door, tail thumping. He raised up on his stout haunches to greet her. "Hey, big guy," Clara said, ruffling the thick fur behind his ears. He waited at the top of the steps while she retrieved his ball from the corner of the porch swing, then bounded after it into the yard. The house was a little bungalow with vinyl siding painted the color of a daffodil. It set back from the road so that the shotgun yard stretched before it to the sidewalk. With its unruly landscaping and rusty porch swing, it was the type of house her parents would frown at if Clara ever allowed them to visit. She bought it 7 years ago with the last money left from the sale of her Chicago condo. Despite her own initial snobbery, she had grown to like it, the yard especially. Never a gardener in her former life, she had discovered that damp earth soothed the smoldering nerves of her fingers. Loamy soil was a balm no cream or ointment had ever been. Now the yard was a wild zigzag of succulents and flowers. A bed of moss rose flowed from the porch to the front gate, and 6 giant blue agave plants erupted from the dirt. Like so much else in her life, she had bent around the circumstances and grown into someone different. She sank to the porch swing, removing the envelope from her pocket. The paper was creased and abused by now, the blue ink of her name smeared like a setting watercolor. Her parents had known she would be named Clara from the moment she was conceived. Not for Clara Schumann, as Clara used to tell the reporters who came to her concerts and competitions, but Clara from the Nutcracker. Her mother had been a ballet dancer, slim and strong and vain, with an artist's devotion to beauty and a lawyer's abhorrence of mistakes. Clara tore open the envelope and withdrew the smaller one inside. The pink post-it note affixed to the front offered only the simplest of explanations. This came for you. The maroon seal was loose, either from the Texas humidity or because her mother had tried to steam it open over her silver teapot. Clara slid a long, slender finger beneath the wax. It separated from the paper with a soft cluck. The piece of cardstock she withdrew was thick as fabric, heavy as a quarter in her palm. There was no specific address to her as a person, no dear, no hello, not even her name at the top of the invitation. Just 3 typed lines after 10 years of silence. Final concert of Zofia Makorska, Saturday, the 24th of May at the Residence. Private, show your invitation at the door. At the bottom, scratched with the nib of one of the antique pens that had scarred the scores of Clara's Bach and Rachmaninoff and beloved Starza, was a single handwritten word, come. Out in the yard, Bingo barked. He stood at the base of the oak tree, watching a pair of bats flit between the branches. Bingo, Clara called. Come. The dog trotted toward her, his eyes yellow in the darkness. Come. Clara knew the voice, the scrape of the pen. It was not an entreaty. It was a command. So as you probably guessed, Clara goes to the concert where she discovers that it's not actually a concert at all. It's a gathering of the beneficiaries of her teacher's estate. And a lawyer comes and reads the will, and everyone, is given what they have been bequeathed, and Clara gets this metronome that she's never seen before in her life, and thus starts a journey for her to try to figure out what it is and what she's doing with it. So, from here, I kind of want to let us choose our own adventure. Often when I talk, things kind of go in a couple of different directions. Many people have a lot of questions about historical research, and we can talk about that. There's a lot of research that went into this book, into the history of Poland, where half of this book is set. Also the history of World War II, where part of this book takes place as well. Many people also are often interested in the publishing process, what it takes to get an agent, take a book to market, all of the challenges in the many years between that. So I'm kind of happy to let you guide me wherever we want to go.
I just wish you could read the rest of it.
Thank you. There is a really good audiobook version. Katrina Link, who's a very talented actor, is the narrator, and she does a really phenomenal job.
I've read the book, and I love the passage you read because the language is so lyrical, but it's that way throughout. And toward the end, when all the classical music is played, your description of the music, you can almost hear it.
Oh, thank you.
But there were other things in the book. The mystery of the metronome drives it, and the characters are so real. But there's all these other little subtexts, like mother-daughter relationships and second chances. Anyway, you gotta read it if you haven't read it.
You're a good reader. I like that you picked up some of the important themes. Yeah, so when I first had the idea for this book, it was many years before I started writing it, which is kind of common for me. I usually have an idea and then it kind of sits in the back of my head for a few years before I have time to get to it. And I used to teach community college, and I lived in Denver, Colorado, and the community college where I taught is in Longmont, Colorado, which is up near Boulder. So I had a long commute. And I had so many good ideas on this commute, let me tell you all. It was like the best creative period of my life. But one day I was driving home and I thought, wouldn't it be great to write a book about 3 women who are connected by their musical lineage? And that was it at that time. and it kind of sat on the back burner. And I was writing at that point the first novel that I wrote, the one that never got published. And so it took me a long while to get to it. And when I started writing the Fire Concerto, I had just had a baby. And in the first conception of this book, I never thought that mother-daughter relationships would be so important. But then I had a baby and it changed my life. And then mother-daughter themes became an enormous part of not only the book, but also the plot, and how mothers protecting their daughters, you know, is in many ways, especially back in the time periods where this took place, it was sometimes a really painful choice.
Where did you do your research?
Kind of all over. So what I kind of tell people when you research for historical fiction, you're reading widely instead of deeply. So I read so many sources for this book across so many different disciplines. And I also did a fair amount of interviews, which is a great way to get information that you can't find in a book. So for instance, Clara is a burn survivor, and I didn't really know a lot about that. And as it happened, my babysitter at the time was friends with this woman who ran a burn unit at a Denver hospital. And this woman very generously agreed to talk to me many times about what happens in the months and years after someone has been in a fire. And the recovery for that is really staggering. And once I learned kind of what Clara would have gone through in order to recover from this fire, I felt like I really understood her so much better, because it's really grueling and tedious, as much healing is, right? Like, the process of recovery, as we all know, is so boring and takes so long. And if you have a big injury, that's, you know, magnified. And for someone who uses their body for their passion or for their career, that often means an entirely, like, a new life is required, which is really hard. But other than interviews and, you know, academic sources, I also relied a lot on travel guides. So this book is set in 1997 and also in 1885. And in order to build the city of Warsaw from 1997, I found one of those old eyewitness travel guides. Do you all remember those? That had all the pictures, and you would take it with you in your suitcase when you traveled. I found one online for $3, and I built the whole city of Warsaw from this, you know, little book, because it had every street corner, what it costs to take the taxi, where you would stay, what you would eat. And I found similarly a great travel guide from the 1880s for English-speaking travelers traveling to the Russian Empire. At that time in history, Warsaw was part of the Russian Empire. And it had similar material. This is what it costs to take a cart. This is what it costs to take a carriage if you have more money. This is where you would stay. This is where you would eat. And it truly, I built the city of the past from this travel guide as well. So when doing research for novels, it's really fun because you're often reading outside of traditional academic research to go into a lot more firsthand accounts and things like that that kind of make a world come alive for you.
I have a question. It's kind of two questions in one, but I was really interested in the musical genealogy, musical pedagogical genealogy.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a literary pedagogical genealogy that you would, you know, assign to yourself? Because our last speaker was Dr. Reiner, who spoke very highly of you, and I can see why. So I was curious if you can trace back, you know, some of your writing influences to your teachers.
That's so interesting. No one's ever asked me that before. Well, Paul Greiner was my teacher and mentor at U of L. He's fantastic. I'm assuming some of you were here last month and saw him.
Several times.
He's so great. Yeah, and he is such a good teacher, you all. Like, when you see him with his work, he's a wonderful writer in the classroom and outside of the classroom, just such a good mentor. He taught me for 1 year, and then I emailed him for 20 years. And I'd be like, Paul, I would need to get an agent and help me. How do I do this? And he would write these long emails like, this is what you need to do. And, you know, just like never stopped being my teacher. So beyond him, you know, I have a lot of influences, but I don't have like a genealogy in that way. But when I was at Bellarmine, Fred Smock, another wonderful Kentucky writer, he was my mentor there. And he actually, I'm so excited to say that next week he's being inducted into the Kentucky Writers Hall of Fame, which is well deserved. Posthumously, he passed a few years ago. But similarly, he really influenced me at that time. He's a poet. At that time, I was also a poet. That's how I started my writing career, is with writing poetry. And then years after my degree at U of L, which was focused in poetry, I thought, you know what, I don't go to bed at night with a volume of poetry sitting on my nightstand. I'm going to bed with a novel right there. Maybe that's what I should write instead. How hard can it be? Well, 15 years later, here I am, right? So I would say that those two really influenced me quite a bit. And other than that, it's really the stuff that I've read, you know, the writers that I admire that have influenced the way that I write.
I have another question that ties into that. You said you had written something that wasn't published, but this was the first published. This is a selfish question because I've dealt with this. Do you feel like you used up your life's worth of experiences on these first ones, and now what's next? Kind of where do you pull from for your next idea?
Yeah, my answer is not at all. I feel like I will die being like, I have 25 more novels in me. And part of that is because I don't really draw that much on my own experience in my novels. Although some people are like, oh, is that, you know, people who know me well are like, oh, is that person, you know? And I'm like, well, I guess part of that person ended up there. But honestly, so there's an old adage in writing that you should write what you know. And in some ways in this book, I did that because I know music. But I always think, and I tell my students, write what you want to know more about. Because if you are out of your depth, you are curious, and that is the primary requirement for writing, is to be curious about the world and about other people and to make up stories about them. So the first novel I wrote was actually like an environmental drama about mountaintop removal coal mining in Appalachia, which I knew nothing about until I did a lot of research. And I'm not from Appalachia, you know, this is like outside of my experience. But I was really moved by it and interested in it, and it helped me, you know, go there. So for me, I think it's more fun to write about stuff beyond my own experience. And in fact, when I pick up a book and it's like the main character is a writer, I'm like, I don't want to read that book. I know what that life's like, you know. I want to read about someone who does something way more interesting, you know.
Cool, thank you.
When you were doing all the research for this, did you see things you might write about in the future, like take
Absolutely.
notes about it?
Yes. So one of that often happens because research is so fascinating when you know delve into the past. There's so much material there. You know, because people in the past, they're just like us, but they didn't have all the stuff that we had, right? It's like same existential worries, same relationship trouble, you know, but without rapid communication and antibiotics, right? So it's like a different calculation. But in this book, one of the things that really propelled me to the book that I'm writing now is in the book, the woman who kills the composer. In the first draft, I wrote her out of the book by having her executed. And then when I looked more deeply into the research, I realized that that was factually inaccurate. At that time in history, in the Russian Empire, which again, Warsaw was part of Russia at that time, the only way a woman would be executed is if she was an enemy of the state. Otherwise, she went directly to the asylum. That's where women were always funneled, okay? So that kind of spurred my next book. I was like, oh wow, all of the interesting women ended up in the asylum together. How fascinating. And I just couldn't stop thinking about it. And that is the general, area of my new book.
When's that coming out?
I don't know, it's not done
Oh.
yet.
Still
Everyone
just a thought.
also keeps asking me that, yes.
Well, it is crazy, like all the things they put women in asylums for. Like
Yes.
my third great grandmother, she was never heard from again. She had seizures, and they put her in the asylum and threw the key away because they think people are crazy or possessed.
Yeah.
So we, just the things you read about, the reasons we put people in there. It's insane.
It is insane, and it's
Yeah.
heartbreaking too. Yeah, back in the late 19th century, before epilepsy was understood, they thought it was a form of madness that was a moral failing, which is really sad. And a lot of epileptics were put in asylums to the extent that many asylums had an epileptic ward, but they were treated just the same. It's really, really very, very sad.
I do have a question. You hear some authors say that they don't know what's gonna happen in their book, that they're going to see where this takes them. It kind of evolves. Other authors plan every little piece out, they know what's going where. Where do you fall in that?
I'm the former. So I usually know the end, but I don't know how to get there. So with every book I've ever written, which is now 3, I guess, if we count the one that's in formation, I've always known the very end. But I mean the very end, like the end chapter. And I'm not quite sure how I'm gonna get there. And the whole process of writing is figuring out how. So it's kind of, it's like driving in the dark, to borrow the old Dr. O quote. But for me, there's like a pinprick of light at the very end. And that helps guide it, But I kind of think, I've heard people say, heard writers say, I plot it all out, I have this outline. And that's mystifying to me, I don't know how you could know all of that when you start, because a lot of times you learn what your character is going to do by putting them in situations, kind of like with people, right? You don't really know who someone is until they're in a very stressful moment, and then you see, their character revealed to some extent. And as a writer, you're essentially putting your character in one stressful situation after another. That is essentially what fiction is, right? It's one conflict following another all the way to the end, and seeing how your person responds and grows from that.
Sometimes when I read a really good book, I get a sense of sadness when it's over, that I'm done with those characters, that I'm not going to go on with their lives. How do you as a writer feel when you're finally done after all the research and writing? How do you feel when you finally come to an end of your novel?
When I think it's the end, like when I turn it into my editor and I'm like, it's over, I have this moment of nostalgia. But unfortunately, with the publishing industry, it's never the end. They're like, oh, can you rewrite that part or whatever? And that goes on for much longer than anyone would like it to. So I think that there's a point at which you're ready to part ways. But really, it's when you, at least in my experience, when you start working with new characters, that you're able to let those ones go. And you're like, okay, now you're on your own journey, and I'm with these people now.
do you mind sharing what caused the first book not to get published?
Yeah, no one in the publishing industry thought it would sell. Yeah, so, and that book got held up in the stage of getting an agent. So in the publishing world, you as a writer have an agent who then is the person who sells your book and is your representative in the industry. It's kind of like a real estate agent. They are your voice. You as the writer don't approach a publishing house. It's these agents who do it for you. And for that reason, for most writers, the biggest and hardest step in a career is getting the agent. Because you don't pay an agent, they get a percentage of your sales. So they only take on a book or a writer if they feel confident that it will sell. And so if you know any writer in your life and they're trying to get an agent, they're gonna be in that stage probably for a long time. And that's where that book got held up. You send out what's called a query letter, which is essentially a one-page description of the book that's similar to what's on the back of a book, with some other, details like who would read this book, what other books that exist already would a reader like that they would like this as well. And a lot of agents were like, oh, I think this would be really good if you changed it X, Y, and Z. And so I tried to do that for a while and kept resubmitting it, and still no one wanted it. Which is, again, it's very hard, but it's very common. Most books that you read that are on a shelf in a store, that's probably not a writer's first book. Most of the stories are not of success, they're of failure.
Is I prefer to hold the book still. I don't even have the other thing, Kindle or whatever. Is that gonna? Hopefully it doesn't ever go away. But do you think in the future that's a printed word like that will be?
I do not. So
Good.
in the industry right now, print copies are holding steady or selling more than ebook. There was a time when that, kind of was lopsided a little bit, but it seems like print is here to stay
Good.
for good.
Good.
Yeah. Audio is taking a big share of the market now. A lot of people like audiobooks, myself included. But it's like a separate kind of category. It does not seem to be detracting from print sales.
When a good friend of mine listens to audiobooks but always while he's driving. To me, that seems maybe it's the way to go, but it seems like if you're driving along and listen to distracting. I don't know. Perhaps you listen to them at home instead of in a. But
I kind of listen to them everywhere. Yeah. I mean, it's just like
not
listening.
distracting, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think it sounds like maybe you're really involved, like you're a good listener, which is great.
I don't know about that. You can ask her about that.
Maybe we'll ask you.
What'd you say? Yeah. I had another question, but now I've forgotten it, so I'll think of it.
Okay.
I was wondering, since this novel has been, it seems to me, well received, and you do have an agent now, do you think that, that first novel will ever be published?
Great question. No, because I won't try to publish it.
Really?
Yeah. So the way that I look at that first book is honestly so similar to the way I look at, like, the first person I loved. It's like, you taught me so much, and I am so glad we did not end up together. You know what I mean? Because I really feel strongly, and I say this as a teacher of writing, no one can teach you how to write a novel. It's such a big thing, and honestly, every novel takes its own form. Each one is different. It's a beast. And you teach yourself how to write a novel by writing it. And when I think of that book, I see all of the ways, like the stitching, I'm like, oh, here's where I had to rip that part out and shove this part back together. And while I'm sure I could revise it and make it okay, I just have no interest in revisiting it. I just want to go forward.
Okay.
I wish there were a magic way. We read it enough, and we enjoy reading. The grandkids see us reading all the time when we're together. We can't get it to move forward with them to read. Oh, what about this Iowa? They just, well, yeah, we have, but The Call of the Wild was a favorite book of mine as a child,
Mhm.
and I
Yeah.
finally talked my one grandson, the second oldest, into reading, and he said, "Well, I finished." So I asked him a few questions I couldn't even remember. I thought, but he did answer them, so I guess he read it, but they just don't read.
Yeah,
like,
this is
I
a
know
big
they're busy
problem.
with sports, but I was too. But I always enjoyed reading. They just can't. It doesn't. It's hard to get them to read, and then their parents don't read much either. So, yeah.
There is, and I'll get on my soapbox here. There is a known, very precipitous decline in reading, not only among children but among adults as well. And we all know the cause of that, right? It's the phone, because now we're all every book is in competition with a phone, right? Which is so much more immediately gratifying and engaging, and that is a very unfortunate thing, and I wish I
Bribery is
knew how
worth a
to
little
fix
bit,
it.
very little.
Yeah.
You know, in the film.
You know, to the gentleman's point right here, I can recall as a kid, I love the smell of a bookstore. I
Yes.
love walking to a bookstore, opening up a book, that fresh
The
crease,
ones on
the way
4th
those
Street, whatever
pages.
their name was, a long time ago, we
And
were
it's
down
just a
to
lost,
Stewart's
it's just a
and- yeah,
lost
it
thing.
is,
I mean,
yeah.
just to
Mhm.
hold a book, to smell it, to feel it, was just it's a lost, a lost thing.
But not lost, because all of you are here.
Right.
We're here in the middle of the day on a Thursday.
But bookstores, you know,
Yeah.
just walking into bookstores back then, you just,
It's true, yeah.
Oh, I still enjoy doing that when I get a chance. Just walk around. Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry.
No, I'm fine.
You're good.
No, I was just, I could babble, so
I was just
enjoy
gonna
it.
say, like Shepherdsville, not far from my house, has opened 2 more bookstores.
That's
2 new
great.
bookstores.
Always good to hear
Yeah,
that.
so that's always nice.
Yeah, I mean, people still read. Like, people are still reading, it's just they're not reading as much as they used to. And that age group of children that are past reading with their parents, they're really not reading.
Well, that's what these all are. So
Yeah.
Do you meet, you said you teach writing, do you meet with people, like, I'm halfway through my first writing of, I guess it's historical fiction, it's 99% historical, but I had the imagined parts in between, I guess that makes it historical fiction.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm halfway through, but I just feel like I can't complete it until like I go to some of the destinations that,
No, you don't have to go.
yeah.
I think a lot of people think that you have to, I used to think that too. Like when I wrote this book, I thought, if I don't go to Warsaw, I can't write this book and set it in Warsaw. And when I started, I was like, I'm going to Warsaw.
Yeah.
And I had an infant, and then COVID started. And I was like, there's no way. I'm going to Warsaw now. And for a while, I thought maybe I should set it somewhere I've been. And then I thought, you know what? I can't travel to the Warsaw of 1997, and I can't travel to the Warsaw of 1885. So I'm going to find it in a book, and I'm going to find people who lived there. So I think that is a good proxy.
And I've done both of those,
Then you're good.
yeah.
Yeah.
I have friends that live in Bermuda, and then I've got the travel books on those.
Yeah. Yeah, just when you're finished, this is what I always do. If I have a section I'm unclear about, I find someone who lives there or who did live there at that time, and I say, here's this chapter. Will you read it and tell me if this feels real to you? And if it does, you're good.
Yeah, what about Austin? Did you go there, or have you lived there? It's very
I've never
real.
lived there, but I have been there. I didn't go there in the 90s, but again, I interviewed several people who did live there in the 90s, and kind of used their feel for what the city was like back then to, replicate that vibe. But the neighborhood where Clara lives, that's the kind of the Congress Avenue area that's really fancy now, but back then it was not fancy. It was like more divey. And I've, spent time there and kind of walked around to get a feel for what her neighborhood would be.
I have maybe the most important question.
Okay.
She was wearing a Radiohead shirt. Are we a big Radiohead fan?
We
Do
are.
have a favorite album? What's the?
Oh, definitely OK Computer for sure.
Okay, that's an acceptable answer. Thank you.
Yeah, it was fun to put a lot of 90s music references
Yeah.
in. That was good.
Did you bring books with you?
Did I bring books with me?
Books with you today?
I did not.
Oh.
I can't sell my own book because I'm not an authorized retailer. But I do have a, I have a QR code you can scan that would take you to.
But you can't sign a Carmichael's.
It's true, but I can sign it. Carmichael's has a arrangement. If you go and buy it there and say I want her to sign it, they'll call me and I'll go
Okay,
sign it.
just because you're in Landenwich, I grew up next to Landenwich.
I would absolutely do it.
Know your politics and people, so. But yeah, I just think I really do want you to sign it. So
Yep,
I
I'm
do
happy
that.
to.
Thank you.
Any other questions before we?
And I am a book, like a audio book person when I'm driving, so do you just get it from like Amazon or?
Yeah, Audible has it and Apple, all the places have it. Yeah.
Well, thank you for your good talk and
Yes.
thank you for
Yes,
your
thank
book.
you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you for your
having
good
me.
questions. These are
Thank you for
amazing.
having me.
Dr. Nana,
So nice to meet you.
Good luck
Thank
with
you
your
for
career.
reading it.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.